What's up, horror fam? Welcome back to the channel. So for today's episode, Maika Monroe signs on for yet another horror film. We have the first trailer and information on the film The Gazer, a neo-noir mystery thriller. And we have the latest information on the 28 years later sequel. So let's get right into it. Neon picks up vampire horror movie Bride starring Maika Monroe. Now, if you don't know Maika Monroe, she is making her way through the horror genre. She has starred in several films, so most recently Longlegs. If you haven't seen Longlegs, I would highly recommend checking it out. It is pretty good for what it is. Is it the best horror film there is out there? I wouldn't say it's the best horror film out there, but it was a nice breath of fresh air into the horror genre, seeing something different than what we've seen thus far in the past. So I can appreciate that when new ideas, fresh ideas come to the table for the genre, and Longlegs was definitely one of them. Maika Monroe and director Chloe Okuno will reteam for the upcoming horror movie Brides, and Longlegs distributor Neon has officially announced this morning that they've boarded the project. It's coming soon. Neon has picked up North American rights to the upcoming Brides of Dracula-inspired vampire film. Deadline notes it's an exclusive report. Neon will release the film theatrically. Here's the synopsis. Set in the 1960s Italy, Sally Bishop and her husband travel to a remote villa in the wake of Sally's nervous breakdown. The villa's owner, a mysterious count, takes a peculiar interest in Sally, but he gets far more than he anticipated when Sally's feminist chaos is added to his perfect, violent Eden of vampire brides. Chloe Okuno's Brides is said to be at least loosely inspired by Bram Stoker's horror classic Dracula, and is set to flip Bram Stoker's narrative on its head, exploring the struggle between societal repression and carnal desire. It's also described as a gothic, glamorous, and gory. In addition to the upcoming Brides, Maika Monroe also has a handful of other projects in the works. Of particular note, she's starring in a remake of The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, and Monroe will also be reprising her role from It Follows and Neon's sequel, They Follow. So as you can see, Maika Monroe is busy in the genre. We have The Hand That Rocks the Cradle that we're still waiting to get the latest update on, along with They Follow, which is a sequel, as it mentions, to It Follows. So here's the first bit of information, the first picture we have as it relates to Brides. We have what appears to be the script, written, directed by Chloe, and then down below, a likely story production. No information on when we can expect to get this one. I would imagine if they start doing filming in early 2025, we could potentially see this one in late 2025, maybe even early 2026, probably January, February. Now going into 2025, that seems to be the time that we're getting a lot of horror films, January, February. I think last count I had was roughly around 13 or 14 horror films that we are going to be getting. Not all necessarily sequels, which is great news. We're going to be seeing a lot of new stuff coming to the genre, so I am looking forward to that. But again, hopefully we'll get this in late 2025. It's just one more thing we can add to a full year of horror. All right, so our next topic, the Gazer trailer is giving serious Memento vibes. Ryan J. Sloane's inventive feature directorial debut hits theaters in February. The folks at Metagraph Pictures have released a new trailer for Gazer. If this one isn't on your radar yet, we're here to let you know that it probably should be. But don't take our word for it. The trailer for Ryan J. Sloane's inventive noir thriller does a pretty damn good job of selling itself, particularly for those who are in the mood for a little something original. So here's a link to the trailer, but we will be doing a trailer review and reaction on this one, so we will put the link to that video in the description of this video, so make sure to jump over there, check it out, watch it along with us, and let us know what you think in the comment section. The thriller follows a young mother who has a unique condition that impacts her perspective of time. The trailer plays with that a bit, as it's a bit disorienting. It's hard to get sense of what's really going on, but that seems to be the point. This mother takes a risky job from a strange woman with a dark past, and craziness ensues. While Christopher Nolan hasn't made a horror movie just yet, he has made some great thrillers. This is giving off vibes from one of his very best, namely Memento. That's not exactly bad company to be in. The official synopsis for this film reads as follows. The affected, with a rare and fatal condition that affects her ability to perceive time and causes sudden blackouts, single mother Frankie Rhodes relies on self-recorded cassette tapes to help her navigate the world. Desperate to make ends meet while she fights for custody of her young daughter, she accepts a risky but high-paying job from a mysterious woman, which draws her into a world of paranoid conspiracies that threatens to swallow her whole. So if you haven't seen Memento, that synopsis for this film is pretty close to Memento, and I would recommend checking that one out. As it mentions, it's not necessarily a horror film, it is more of a thriller mystery, very much like this one's going to be, but this one's being classified as a horror film, so It is going to be on our radar. It does come out in February of 2025, even though it's been through various film festivals throughout 2024, so we are excited to see this one. The film represents Stallone's debut feature, which he wrote alongside Mastroianni. The film was shot on a short string budget over weekends in the spring and fall for 2 years. Stallone, meanwhile, was working as an electrician, and Mastroianni was working in film programming in New York. It was shot on 16mm, which accounts for that vintage lo-fi look. Gazer also screened at Fantastic Fest earlier this year, where it was met with warm response. So that's one of the ones, I mean, as I just mentioned, it made its way through various film festivals throughout 2024. And it actually had a release date listed for this film of October 2024. But again, that was just another film festival that it had appeared at, and we won't get a full theatrical release, as it mentions here, until February 21st, 2025. So I'm looking forward to this one. Here's our first poster for this film. Pretty simple, not much to it. I think that just kind of adds a bit to the mystery of this as a mystery thriller neo-noir film. I'm looking forward to this one, and the fact it's on 16mm film, I think that's just going to add a bit of that rawness, that independent look to it. That I think it's just going to add a bit more of that aesthetic to what the message is for this film. All right, moving on to our last topic for today's episode. DaCosta's 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, releasing January 2026. So here we have an image which is from the 28 Years Later trailer. Now, if you have seen that trailer, and there's a quick snapshot of this along with all those pillars in the background that are all made of bones, I believe this is one of our first looks at the Bone Temple, or at least somewhere outside of the Bone Temple. So I'm glad that they are playing off of that scene with the title of the second film. In the wake of 28 Years Later, next summer, the Infection franchise will continue with sequel 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, which Sony has already dated for theatrical release. Directed by DaCosta, 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple will release January 16th, 2026. This will be the second movie in a planned trilogy of new movies. But first, 28 Years Later will be unleashed in theaters on June 20th, 2025. So it goes on to talk about what the synopsis is for 28 Years Later. We don't necessarily need to go over that. We've covered off on 28 Years Later in our trailer reaction, as well as on various episodes. So make sure to go back and check those episodes out along with our trailer review and reaction to the 28 Years Later, the first film in this new trilogy. From what we understand, DaCosta has already wrapped filming on The Bone Temple, with plot details likely to be kept under wraps until 28 Years Later comes along next summer. Interesting to note, however, that there is a literal Bone Temple glimpse in the official trailer for 28 Years Later, which seems to be a pivotal location for this new trilogy. Based on trailer reviews, 28 Years Later is already tracking to be a massive box office hit for Sony in 2025, so we can be pretty certain that their ambitious trilogy plan will ultimately pay out. Now, I'm not going to go that far. Now, yes, the 28 Years Later trailer, I think, is the most watched trailer in history thus far. And if it's not, I know it was pretty close to being the most watched trailer. I know there's a lot of anticipation for this film. It's been almost 20 years, a little over 20 years since the last film, especially since the original film came out in 2002. So that's 22 years since the original film. So I would imagine there's a lot of fans of that original film that have been waiting for this one, and we're finally getting it. Even though we did get a sequel off the original, didn't really feel like a true sequel, and I think this one might just be more of what we've been expecting and looking for. Now, whether or not this garners off on this trilogy being a massive box office hit for Sony, that remains to be seen. I think this first film will absolutely be a hit for them. Now, whether or not the next two are, again, that remains to be seen. We're going to have to get some more information on the story, who's going to be in them, the trailers, all that comes with it, I think will then tell us whether or not they're going to be as good or as great as we expect them to be. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for today's episode. I just want to say a quick thank you to all the new subscribers to the channel. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you for all the support, especially for a growing channel such as ours. You have no idea, again, how greatly appreciated it is. And if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think about Maika's new horror film coming up that's been added to her list. Let us know if you have any interest in The Gazer. And again, go over, check out our review and reaction to that trailer. It's looking pretty good. And are you looking forward to 28 Years Later? And now we have the information on 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Looking forward to both of them. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for today's episode, and we will see you at the next one. Peace.